And joining us now, pleased to have with us President and CEO of CHS Incorporated, Jay Debberton is with us. Jay, it's always great to catch up with you. How are you, sir?
I'm well, Jesse. It's great to talk with you as well.
Well, thank you for the time. We are talking about third quarter earnings from CHS. And again, some really great numbers coming out from the company here for the third quarter, looking at fiscal 2022. So, talk about the third quarter a little bit, just overall, some of the numbers that CHS saw, Jay.
Sure, Jesse. So third quarter for CHS was a record quarter. We've never had the performance that like we have in the history of the company in the third quarter. And I'd point to a couple of things behind that. First of all, strong support by local cooperatives and farmers that own us, and CHS helping those people to be more and more successful. Strong demands for commodities from around the world. Also, some market conditions from around the world that I'm sure we'll talk about that impacted those results, and through all those three big legs to the stool, we were able to report earnings of $576 million for just the quarter, which puts us at $1.2 billion of earnings for 3 quarters through the year on revenues of almost $35 billion through 3 quarters. So very, very strong quarter and leading up to be an extremely strong year for CHS, which goes to the value of the cooperative in that when we have these performance, when we have these earnings, it goes back to the people that own us and do business with us.
Well, and let's talk a little bit more in depth about some of these things that have led to some of these record revenues, Jay. You mentioned this, just some of the strong global demand that is out there, strong markets, a lot of things watching, including market volatility, higher commodity prices, et cetera, et cetera. Talk about some of that global demand picture for CHS here this past quarter.
Sure, Jesse, and I'll speak to it in kind of two segments of our business. First of all, in the energy segment, we had a much improved quarter versus last year. We had earnings in energy of 163 million, which is up about almost that much from the quarter ago. We were up 158 million from a quarter ago, and I would point to a couple of things there. One of which is just the world kind of pulling back out of COVID, global energy demands back up. While energy demands at CHS were never really impacted as much as some companies during COVID, we are part of a global commodity with energy, and so we get impacted even if our demands aren't lighter. And then in addition, we all know what's happening on street prices for energy, and just a lot of factors that have gone into that, and that have led to some of those prices, and so that's part of the reason as well. And then on the ag side, it is just really being driven by strong demands from around the world for the products that our owners grow. Strong processing margins from oilseed. We process canola and soybeans and corn into ethanol, but particularly on the soybean side, just strong performance there. And then the volatility that we all know has happened within commodities as some of the world conditions have moved into then the pricing and the supply that this impacts the world.
Well, and I think as well, some of those world conditions, everything going on in the Black Sea, Ukraine, Russia, we've talked about this, Jay, but we continue to see it reflected here in the third quarter with CHS. Just you mentioned some of those strong demand for various commodities, various, on the agronomic side products or on the energy side, you think about, Canadian crude oil, which is processed by CHS refineries. I mean, things like that, we've seen that shift with everything going on in the Black Sea region. And I think that's a big part of what we need to remember here, just as we've moved through the third quarter and now moving forward, Jay.
You're absolutely right, Jesse, and we're quick to point out that we have strong earnings, strong revenues, but we also know there are some impacts that have come from the conditions in Ukraine, and we're quick to point out that those conditions that the people are suffering in Ukraine do not make the profits worth it. It is something that's just horrible for what people are essentially being subjected to and conditions within Ukraine. At CHS, we have 46 employees within that country. We do business there. So we are very close to conditions and how we are trying to keep our employees safe in these times. While we don't have investments in assets or facilities in Ukraine, we do business there. So we have inventory and we know very well the limitations of trying to get any product out of Ukraine. So we're quick to remember that of world conditions that also just have tragedy associated with them that impacts results for us.
Well, I'll shift the conversation a little bit here, Jay. Just as you look forward here into this next quarter through the rest of this year, what are some things you're watching closely as CHS? What are you watching in the ag space that we really need to keep our eye on here in the next few months moving forward?
Sure, Jesse. I'll start with the fact that the U.S. really needs to have a good crop. With Ukraine essentially being out of the market from a practical sense, at least as we're talking here this morning together, the U.S. needs to have a good crop because there's the market is going to need to shift to move product to parts around the world that maybe the U.S. wasn't always the supplier of first choice to. Perhaps the Ukraine was. Well, now that's all going to rebalance, but it needs to start with bushels available. And so we need to come off in the autumn with a good crop. We look to be doing that, as we talked about earlier. The crop is coming along. There's always pockets where there's challenges and so forth, but it's coming along well. And for those that got in late, it's catching up. Then, as we look to other things that in the autumn ahead of us, fertilizer supply and how does that kind of sort out, given that Russia is a big global supplier of fertilizer. Now, right now, we don't see any reason why supply won't be there for fertilizer. Prices may be high, that may be part of the mix, but physical supply looks like it's going to be there. The one area that I might raise up, Jesse, that doesn't always get the same visibility, but I think is something that your listeners that are in the corn country will want to keep an eye on, and that's going to be propane supply. If we need to dry some corn this autumn, propane supply has got some new demands on it from a macro point of view, and those demands are essentially to export propane. Much more so than was done a decade ago. Now, while CHS doesn't export propane, the industry does, and the industry exports a lot of it. So what that means, I think, for farmers is that you cannot wait until you know exactly what the propane needs are going to be for the farm, because by then it may be too late to get supply and plans put in place. So it's just something to stay close with. We work with the local cooperatives that own CHS every day on supply planning, but it's one I would just raise up that doesn't always get the kind of the forward thinking. But we all know that if you are drying a crop, it's a very short window and it's really intense during that window.
It is very intense, and that is a great point to remember, especially as we move into the fall. Jay, fantastic stuff as always. Before we run out of time, anything else we haven't mentioned today?
No, I think I would just say, as I look at the value of a cooperative in years like this is really where it shines. In that, yes, strong year, strong earnings, but those earnings go right back to the people that own us and do business with us. So really a good testament to the cooperative system.
Well, with that, we appreciate the time. As always, President and CEO of CHS Incorporated, Jay Deberton. I know folks can learn more as well, chsinc.com, or contact their local cooperative. Jay, always a pleasure, and I wish you a great rest of your week.
And you as well, Jesse. Thank you.